interest, obviously a lot of jokes. Some of them TCU fans were probably felt like they were being harassed once again after what Bennett did to them in the national championship game. Bennett was still out celebrating the national championship game. A lot of jokes being had at Bennett's expense, which is what happens when you are arrested and you have the high-profile nature that Bennett tends to have. And I'm not going to be too scandalized by this. I know there are some snotty people out there saying he should be down at the Senior Bowl, trying to prove he's worthy of being an NFL quarterback. Quite frankly, there's some of the stuff going on with the Senior Bowl and whether or not guys are going invited or competing and how that is labeled and handled. I think it's a little bit of a PR spin. Personally, when it comes to Stetson Bennett and the Senior Bowl, look, I think it's pretty well known that the Senior Bowl was trying to court Will Levis, and if Levis didn't get that offer, they were going to offer it to Stetson Bennett. Well, yes, Levis is seen as a better NFL prospect. Stetson Bennett is no consolation prize, given what he had just done at the collegiate level, given that he was a Heisman Trophy finalist, given that he's the back-to-back starting quarterback for the national championship team. So I don't blame him for saying, hey, I know you guys strung me along and I was a backup option. I'm going to go choose to train elsewhere and not participate in the Senior Bowl. And it's not a great quarterback class in the Senior Bowl this year. There was, in my opinion, not a first or second round quarterback out there. And so it'll be interesting to sort of see what comes out of that. Georgia is well represented down there in Mobile this week. Chris Smith, the safety, who with a strong week can firmly play himself into being a second-round pick. Kenny McIntosh is going to have a chance to really impress down there this week, especially, I think, as a pass catcher and what he might potentially be able to bring to NFL teams there. Jack Podlesny is down there. It's really tough for kickers to get drafted, but you can impress teams in interviews and show teams what you're capable of doing, and I think that can help potentially set him up to have an NFL career here. And one last little bit here on Stetson. While, I'm not scandalized by this public intoxication arrest, there are much worse things that you could be arrested for. This is something he can't afford to keep happening. There have already been questions about, well, how dedicated is he, to the game of football and bettering himself, because it is no longer just a game you're playing for fun. It is a full lifestyle level commitment at the NFL level. And yes, I know he's led a college team and that's very big, but these are billion-dollar companies that guys like Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes are leading. And look, Stetson, I think, is still very worthy of being drafted. I think he's going to end up being drafted, but he's not being drafted to be a starter. He's not being drafted to come in and play right away. He's being drafted to be a backup and maybe a guy you can develop into. And ultimately, in the event that you need him to come in there and play in a pinch, he can absolutely come in and do that. You look just this afternoon at the value of that as the San Francisco 49ers were down to their fourth-string quarterback in Josh Johnson, and I know he leaves the game with an injury, but even with what I saw from a limited Brock Purdy, it was still better than what we saw with Josh Johnson. So there's real value in having a quality NFL backup, and I think you're going to continue to see that as this game continues to be more physical and we see the effects of a 17-game season. But if you're a backup quarterback, there's a reason you don't know who the backup quarterback is for the Bengals. There's a reason you didn't know until today that Josh Johnson was the backup quarterback. And while, yes, part of that is because they're not playing, part of it is also because they're not making off-field distractions. And while I'm hesitant to throw that out there, if you're Stetson Bennett, you can't be making these kind of headlines. And he knows that going forward. And I expect this to be a one-off thing and have him reel it in. But this is just the sort of thing where when you're trying to impress NFL decision makers, this is not something you can really afford to have on your resume there. And look, he's not the first 25-year-old to be out drinking in public past 4 a.m. or whenever. He was arrested at 6 a.m. this morning. He's not the first one to do that. He's not the last one to do that. But not everyone gets to be an NFL quarterback. And for Stetson to go on and try and do that, he can't afford to keep having these sort of negative distractions or headlines, because ultimately at the NFL level, they're going to want to keep you quiet and see you just come in there, do your job, keep your head down, and keep things moving there. So I think that's a thing where Stetson's got to be careful. And look, he's ultimately going to have to answer to this, not to the public, not to the media, not to us, but to NFL teams and decision makers. They're going to ask him, hey, is this something we need to be worried about? Your drinking pattern, your drinking habits. Obviously, you mentioned that last year off the national championship game, him downing a bottle of Pappy, showing up drunk not showing up drunk, but very clearly intoxicated and hungover for the Good Morning America interview the next day. These are sort of signs of a pattern that if you're an NFL team, I'm not necessarily sure